Welcome to Lingua Latina Tutorials with Mr. K, Pensvm D. This video explains the new grammar and syntax found in Chapter 31 of the Lingua Latina per se Illustrata series. It is meant to accompany the Latina Disco text, available from Focus Bookstore, and the Pensvm D worksheets, available from 50%latin.blogspot.com or christianlanguage.com. Let's go to Chapter 31. And look at some of the new features we have here. Let's start with line 29, where we have Orontes, who says, Tum Bacchus Deus, qui quodam beneficium regi bene volebat, dabo tibi, inquid quid optaveris. And so Orontes, little disturbed, continues to tell his story. Then Bacchus, the god Bacchus, who, because of some certain kindness of the king, wanted well for him, Bacchus said, "I will give you whatever you want." Quid is an indefinite relative pronoun. It means whatever you want, and its equivalent quis, which means whoever. So quis, whoever, quid, whatever. Indefinite relative pronouns. Indefinite because you don't know exactly who or what this thing is. In line 94, move ahead to 94, and we see servienum dominum clementem amant, severum oderunt. For slaves love a kind master, they hate a strict one. Notice here that we have two parallel verbs, amant and oderunt, but notice also that they have completely different forms while they're translated in a similar way. Amant is third person plural, present indicative active, they love, while oderunt is third person plural, perfect indicative active. So we have a present verb and a perfect verb, both meaning having a present tense meaning. That's because odisse, to love, which should be to have loved, this odisse is a defective verb. It has lost its all of its present forms. So odisse, the infinitive, means to hate. It's the equivalent, the opposite of amara, to love. And so if you're going to compare the forms of these verbs, let's just go, we'll do a comparison with the present. The present tense, we have amant and oderunt. They love and they hate. This should be they hated. Gotta go back. They hated, but it's they hate, present meaning. Then imperfect, amabant, they were loving. But because we don't have a present form for imperfect, we use the pluperfect for this. So it's oderant, add a ramarasarat to the stem. They used to hate, or they were hating. And then for the future, amabunt, they will love. And we use the future perfect for odisse, so oderint, they will love. So even though these forms look a little bit unusual, just remember that odisse, very common verb, does not have any kind of a present system. So when you see the perfect forms, translate them as their present system equivalents. In line 122, we have eius rei exemplum memoratur, Titus Manlius Torquatus, qui filium suum quorum exercitu necari iusit, quia contra imperium patris cum hoste pugnavit, etc. So we have, we'll start with Titus Manlius Torquatus, who ordered that his son be killed quorum exercitu, in the presence of or in front of the army. So what are the case number and genitive of exercitu? Exercitu comes from exercitus, so it's a fourth declension noun. And so in this case we have an ablative with quorum, the preposition, in the presence of. Notice in the margin that quorum takes the ablative. Early in the book we memorized or went over the prepositions that take the ablative: ab cum de, ex in pro, sine sub prae quorum. So quorum was the last one on that list of those prepositions that take the ablative. The next new feature is in line 132. So go with me there to where Amelia says, pater qui infantem exposuit ipse necandus est. So here, what is the part of speech of necandus? Well, necandus is a gerundive. We learned previously about gerunds. Now gerunds have the same ending, well, they don't have undus, but they have the nd ending plus a, but they only have the genitive, dative, ablative, genitive, accusative, dative, and ablative endings. So this is not a gerund. Also, gerunds are active in meaning. So nekara means to kill. So this would be killing in an active sense. So somebody or something killing something. But here what we have is the father who has exposed his infant himself needs to be killed. So we have a passive sense here. Instead of rather than him killing, he himself needs to be killed. So this, when you have an undusa ending and it's passive, it's a what we call a gerundive. And if we were going to conjugate this verb form, we would have necandus sum est, necandi sumus est sunt. The name of this construction, when you put a gerundive, necandus, plus a form of sum, it is called a passive periphrastic. Now, passive periphrastic, it's an awful sounding form, but all it means is it's a roundabout way of saying that something needs to be done. Something ought to be done. So he himself, he needs to be killed, he should be killed. When you have this form, this undusa plus est, it means, it shows necessity of something happening. The actual form itself, necandus, is a future passive participle, something that needs to be, needing to be killed, and sometimes can be it often shows up, or sometimes shows up without est, and in those cases, it's acting just like an adjective, a person, vir necandus, a man who needs to be killed, for example. In line 147, I went too far. In line 147, we have this line. Aemilia says, non omnes veri sunt rumores qui afferuntur super Christianis. So not all of the rumors are true which are bandied about Christians, super Christianis. Notice that super here takes the ablative case. Normally super, or often super, will take the accusative case when it's above. So super terram, above the ground, as opposed to super terra, about the ground, like he's talking about the ground. So if you're talking about Christians, super Christianis, when it stands in place of de, it takes the ablative. In line 161, we have Orontes saying, ille servus non puniendus, sed potius laudandus fuit. So that slave should not have been punished, but rather he should have been praised. Here we have another example of the construction we saw before of the gerundive plus a form of sum. Laudandus plus fuit, puniendus plus fuit. So notice that the form of sum can be in various tenses. Here we have the perfect of sum from fui, fui, fuisti, fuit, etc. So how are laudandus and puniendus different from the gerunds that we learned before? Puniendum would be punishing, the gerund. Laudandum would be praising, and that would be the gerund form. But here we have should not have been punished, not punishing, but have been punished. That slave should not have been punished, but he should have been praised. These are passive paraphrastics. The gerundive plus sum, meaning something needs to be done. Again, notice the difference between gerund and gerundive. Gerund active, gerundive passive. Gerund punishing, gerundive needing to be punished. Gerund praising, gerundive needing to be praised, etc. In line 159, we have another new construction. We saw this earlier. Quid dominus imperavit, servo faciendum est. We saw before quid, whatever. So whatever the master has commanded, servo faciendum est, needs to be done by the slave. Notice here that we have servo, which is dative case. Okay, it looks identical to the ablative in form, but in reality is dative, and if you had a noun that distinguished the dative and the ablative, you'd see that. But it's the same as a servo, by the slave. So this passive periphrastic construction, faciendum est, needs to be done, will take what we call the dative of agent. Instead of an ablative of agent, a servo, we get a dative of agent, servo, with no arab. The next new construction that we see is in line 169. And here we have, let's start with Orontes, who says, quod venus suadet in iuria non est, etc. Sane laudandus est illa juvenis qui non modo feminam illam pulcherrimam abducere ausus est, sed etiam miles fortissimus fuit, etc. So, of course, that young man needs to be praised, laudandus est, another periphrastic, who not only dared to run away with or steal that most beautiful of women, but he also was a very brave soldier, etc. So, ausus est. What are the person, number, tense, mood, and voice of this verb? It is a third person singular, perfect, indicative, deponent verb. Notice in the margin that audere ausum esse, to dare, to have dared, not to have been dared. It only has two forms here. What this tells you is that audere ausum esse is one of those few verbs that we call semi-deponents. In this instance, where you have ausus est, it's acting in a deponent way. He dared. We translate it actively, even though it's a passive, perfect passive in form. But in its present system, audere, it has its full active system. So audeo, audes, audet, I dare, you dare, he, she, it dares. But then in the perfect, we go to our passive form. So semi-deponent verbs, if we were going to compare the full list of audeo, the present system of audeo, we'd have audeo, audes, audet, audemus, audetus, audent, I dare, you dare, he, she, it dares, we dare, you dare, they dare. And then our perfect system, ausus a sum es est, I dared, you dared, he, she, it dared, and ausi I a sumus est sunt, we dared, you all dared, they dared. Other verbs that have the same form, there's an acronym that can help you remember those, and that acronym is GAS. And that stands for, the G is for gaudeo, gavisus, or gavisum esse, to rejoice and to have rejoiced. The A stands for this verb, audere, ausum esse, to dare, to have dared. And then the S stands for solera, solitum esse, to be accustomed and to have been accustomed. Those are the very common semi-deponents that you should learn. In line 172, got another new feature. Here we have vivat fortissimus quisque. Whoever is very brave, let him live. Like Viva Las Vegas, long live Las Vegas. Vivat fortissimus quisque. Let each person each of the bravest live. Notice that vivat, it comes from vivere, to live, so we can identify the subjunctive form, third person singular subjunctive. But why do we have a subjunctive here? This is what we call a adjussive, or it's often very similar in form to the optative subjunctive, but usually when you don't have utinam, which means I wish or would that, we call this adjussive. It's an indirect command, let him live on, but it's a way of saying it kind of a polite way. Instead of saying vive, live, you say vivat, let him live. Notice the same thing here with we want, the plural. Let all lovable women live. Another, this one time is third person plural, but it's still subjunctive active. And another example of adjussive / optative mood. The next new feature is in that same line where we have amandai. Notice that we have the nd ending on amara, but instead of amandum or this form amandai is not a gerund, as we learned before, but rather it's a gerundive. How can you tell this is a gerundive rather than a gerund? Remember, the gerund is active in meaning, so loving, the women of the loving woman, for example. But here we have feminae amandai, women who need to be loved, or what we would just say is lovable or beloved women. Notice it agrees in form with feminae. You have the I ending and the I here, because amandai is a future passive participle. Again, it's called a gerundive, but in form it's a future passive participle, and so a participle is part adjective, part verb. So the adjective part has to agree with feminae. Lovable women. Now that we've seen all the forms of the participles, it would be a good time to just quickly review, for a simple verb like amare, what the participles are. So in the active voice, we have only two participles. We have the present and the future. There's no perfect active participle. So the present active it declines like amans, amantis, amanti, or amans, amantem, amantis, amanti, an amante or amanti in the ablative, meaning loving. So the loving person, persona amans. In the future, it has an urus aum ending, so amaturus aum, about to love. Femina amatura, the woman about to love. In the passive voice, we have no present passive for the participles, the part adjective, part verbs. But in the perfect, we have that supine form, amatus aum, having been loved, or the loved one. And then in the future, we have the future passive, amandus aum, about to be loved. And that's the form we have here with amandai, the women about to be loved, literally, or what we would say is lovable women. In line 173, we have gaudeamus atqueamemus, let us rejoice and let us love. We have two subjunctives, here this time first person plural subjunctives from gaudere and amara. And why is it subjunctive here? And this is one that we learned before, the hortatory subjunctive. It's a mild way of urging a group to action. So let's do this, rather than giving a more strict order. Let's rejoice, let's love. In line 176, we have another subjunctive. We have quis feminas amat, poculum tolat, et bibat mecum. Whoever loves women, let him raise his cup, and let him drink with me. This is an example of a true jussive subjunctive, a mild way of giving a command. Let him raise his cup, instead of saying like tole your cup, raise your cup. Let him raise it, and let him drink from bibera. Remember that jussive, to help you remember that the word for that form, jussive, comes from eubera usi. Usi, I commanded, I ordered. So usi and usive, jussive, it comes from the verb to command or to order somebody to do something, but it's a mild kind of an order. In line 177, we have nunc merum bibendum est, another one of those passive periphrastic constructions. Remember, the passive periphrastic has a gerundive, bibendum, plus a form of esse, to be. So, and it means needing to be done. So now the merum needs to be drunk. The unmixed wine needs to be drunk. But we probably wouldn't say it that way. We'd probably say something like, now we need to drink the unmixed wine, but just understand the way the construction works. This thing needs to be done. The next new feature in line 178, we have the same construction. Cornelius tacendum est, non bibendum. There is a need for silence, or it needs to be quiet. There isn't a need to be drinking. So here, a literal translation isn't going to capture the meaning of this. There is a need for silence, and there is not a need for drinking. Basically, you need to be quiet, and you need to stop drinking. And he's talking to Orontes. If we took tacendum est and we were to fully conjugate that form, tacendus a sum est and tacendi a sumus est sunt, meaning I need to be quiet, you need to be quiet, he, she, it needs to be quiet, we need to be quiet, you all need to be quiet, and they need to be quiet. Normally you're going to see it only in the third person singular form. That's the way it most often will appear. In line 196, we have Orontes, who is quoting the poet, saying, Quis quisam atvaleat, pereat qui nescit amare. Quis quis, we saw earlier quid quid, whatever. Here we have quis quis, whoever. This is another example of an indefinite relative pronoun. And in the same line, waleat, we have another subjunctive from walera. Let him be strong. Let him be strong, whoever loves. This is another example of a jussive, or in this case, it could also be called an optative subjunctive, where you're expressing some kind of a wish, but it's also a mild form of a command. Whoever loves, let him be well. Be strong, you guys who love. And we see this same thing with pereat. Whoever doesn't know how to love, let him die. Pereat. Notice the form of pereat. It is a subjunctive from perira, to perish, but it is not the form you'd expect, because from perira, with an era ending, you'd expect periat. In the let's eat caviar, ia, is what the era verbs turn into in the subjunctive. However, since perira is from eo, era, to go, this form follows the irregular form of eo. So it's peream, pereas, pereat, pereamus, pereamus, pereatis, pereant in the subjunctive. And that is the last new feature for this chapter. Thanks for listening.